Welcome everyone to Spiritfire's first online lecture of 2015. It's a pleasure to be with you. Our subject tonight is full, and I'm going to do my best to keep this to just an hour. That means that we will just touch on a few of the many layers of Chiron and of the myth, and leave you largely with the handout that you were sent by email, with the webcast of tonight, which will be posted and you will receive email about as well. And you, in your own pondering with your chart, that will be, of course, the best exploration that any of us can do, is to take time with it and muse on our chart. My interest in Chiron was sparked by two people. One was a dear friend who still, I haven't seen her in a while, but we were so close for quite some time, Mitchell-Moniak. She lives in the Boston area, and if you live in the Boston area and you want an impeccable astrology reading, contact Monique. I'm sure you can find her by the web. She was a great mentor to me in my early years of learning astrology. We had many intimate, long conversations, and it was due to her, in conjunction with Michael Robbins, who of course many of us are familiar with. We know how impeccable and astute Michael is regarding astrology, and I was in the early Boston esoteric psychology class back in the late 80s when my astrology was sparked. So between these two, my interest in astrology was stabilized and established, and my interest in esoteric astrology. And then with that underpinning, I then built upon the classical myth interest that I had my whole life long since I was a child. Being a Cancer sun, I always hearken to the past, if you will, and the deep past of humanity, as well as the deep psyche of humanity. And what I came to see very clearly was that the astrology that I was learning or relearning according to past lives and the training of past lives clearly matched very well with the myths that I was familiar with since a child. And with that, I could see, as do many others, could see the spiritual path, the journey of the psyche. And then finally, when I started to teach esoteric astrology and psychology with colleagues Sarah Traub and Eva Smith, then we started to look for good books on a wide variety of subjects related to psychology and astrology. And one of them at the time was new, and it was Chiron, The Healing Journey by Melanie Reinhardt. She engages the classical Greek myth of Chiron, and in doing so, she understood the psyche and the path. It's a great book. It's out in a reprint now. This is the cover of it. I highly recommend it. And that is what really sparked my interest in Chiron. What I discovered was that as I looked at my own chart, the more I understood my chart, the more I understood my path. The more I understood my chart, the more it kept pointing to Chiron, and Chiron as a synthesis point of everything in my chart. Then, because I was a teacher and with many people's charts in front of me on an ongoing basis, and I was doing private sessions at the time as well, I kept seeing this same amazing thing, that Chiron over and over again not only had its own story to tell, but that it somehow encapsulated or synthesized the primary themes of everyone's chart. And that's what I hope to offer you tonight. A little astronomical information. Chiron was discovered in 1977. At first it was called a planetoid, which is a minor planet, minor meaning it's just smaller in size. But as, you know, if we look back at 77, we look back at the technology then, the types of telescopes then, etc., then we can understand how there would be some new names given every time a new telescope was invented and pointed towards the solar system or out to the heavens. And so Chiron ended up with basically 3 designations over a short period of 10, 15 years. It now is looked upon as an asteroid. Some want to call it a comet because it does oftentimes put forward a tale such as this. But anyone who's investigating the electric universe model, you would see that they describe something else with that kind of tale, and I'll let you do some YouTubes on that. However, the shape-shifting that Chiron seemed to be offering to the astronomers is actually important for us to notice as esotericists and people who look for meaning in things. It indicates, of course, the nature of its energies. It is a shapeshifter. It is a centaur, a half and half being that presents in one way and presents in another according to its circumstances. That points to our psyche. That points to the path. That points to our inner reality and how we create it. Chiron is found between Saturn and Uranus. Of course, since all of you here have some astrological background, you know that Saturn is the last of the inner solar system. Uranus is the first of the outer solar system. You know that Saturn represents the limit, the tangible, the ring past not. And you know that Uranus represents the unknown, the new, the revolutionary, that which is yet to be known. Having said that then, for Chiron, and there are other asteroids in that belt, to be named as such, it has this in between worlds, in between phases quality to it. That will be important for us tonight. And lastly, astronomically, why I could not find, but this new name called a centaur for this type of celestial object in our solar system within the planet range of Jupiter or Neptune. And on one site, I found that it said between Mars and Neptune. These are called centaurs. Again, why? I do not know. And we want to note, however, that Chiron, so named, was the first centaur astronomically, and more important, was the first centaur mythologically. I'll stop occasionally for questions once we get into some charts. So the 2 points that we're going to focus on through the evening are these. The Chiron itself is a multi-layered energetic in one's chart. The myth is a very full myth. You have it in the handout that I sent. Again, I will commend that to your study as well as your own ponderings of your chart with it in hand. And secondarily, the Chiron encapsulates or synthesizes the primary themes in one's chart. I sent all of you a preliminary note. For most of you, you got it 2 days ago, and that was encouraging everyone to take the time to review your chart and try to determine for yourself the 1, 2, or 3 primary themes in your chart. I can only say for myself that that is what I, again, have observed over and over again in almost 30 years of looking at charts. that there are that few themes. They repeat through various configurations in the chart, but the chart reduces to those few themes. That's powerful. That states something about the soul's intention and purpose and the clarity of that as far as the soul is concerned. So again, that too is unto itself, if you've never looked at your chart with that in mind, to deduce the few primary themes, that is a very worthwhile endeavor. So the first theme to take up is the one of abandonment. As it says in your handout, Chiron was abandoned by his mother immediately. He was a child of a rather raucous, not quite a rape, but a clandestine event. And the mother was appalled by this child, who was the first of his kind, a centaur, human on the top, horse on the bottom. His father was an immortal, Kronos, another name for Saturn, or he became Saturn in the Roman mythology. There's a lot of differences between Kronos and Saturn, and that's worth looking into should you have an interest. But Kronos was an immortal, and Kronos was a titan, so not only a god, but a particular type of god, and again with that hugeness, right? Hugeness and grandiosity. Long story short, though, Chiron is abandoned. That's our first mythic theme to look at. What we will see in the chart is, if we look at Chiron in our chart, and you have your chart, we will see that, and here I hope you can see my cursor and allowing for the satellite delay. Chiron is here in the 6th house in this chart, conjunct Saturn, Chiron, and Pisces. What we see is that the theme of abandonment can have many presentations. Those listed are examples. And then, of course, you might have your own version of abandonment. Maybe it's not by a parent. Maybe it's not by divorce or some sort of illness in the early childhood, but with the parents or the guardians. Maybe it's your friends. Maybe friends just abandon you frequently, or they say they'll be there on time and they're never there on time. That's its own form of abandonment. So we would look for if that theme, not just sporadically, but as a theme, is in your life. I should say that not every layer of the myth will apply equally to everyone. But please rest assured, most of the layers of the myth will apply to you in some way, because Chiron encapsulates the journey of the soul and encapsulates and synthesizes the themes of your chart. So I'm going to kind of rest in the confidence that I think you'll find most layers of the myth represented. In this chart, we want to look at the sign of Pisces, in this case, and look at the house. So for this native, this person in fact did have an abusive childhood. The abandonment was just that. There was neglect. There was a father who was not around much, and when the father was around, it wasn't very happy. We see, as most of us as astrologers will know, we see with Saturn conjunct this Chiron, it has to indicate something, and will indicate in this case a hardship. We see the Saturn, of course, opposing the stellium as well in the 11th and 12th houses, which would be thematic of the chart. But the Chiron is going to just represent that all on its own. With the 6th house focus, the idea here would be that it was to be handled quite matter-of-factly by her, and she assumed that other people had similar issues in her life. And when I was counseling her, that was one of the things that she had shame about, not realizing that it was not normal in most people's homes to have the situation that she did, because she didn't speak on it. She assumed that other people, not that it was everyone's life, but that other people had a similar life. Because of that as well, this native experienced the idea of the misfit. For Chiron, the misfit was, first off, that he was the only centaur until more were created by the gods. You'll have to read the mythology to get the story on that. And when more centaurs were created, they were of a raucous and kind of bellicose way of being, a little hedonistic, sometimes quite hedonistic. And Chiron grew to be a very gentle, meditative, artistic, introspective being. So he was a misfit as far as the centaur went, and he was a misfit as far as the immortals went, because he was a centaur. They didn't want to hang out with him. They were in a human god form. And the mortals didn't really hang out with him unless they wanted something from him. If they wanted to be healed, they wanted to be mentored, they wanted to just understand something different, they went to Chiron. So he was a misfit. Please take a moment, look at your charts, and see what you see. And if anyone has a question, please raise your hand. One of the things that you would want to look for is the quality of the sign that Chiron's in, and if that somehow describes the nature of, again, if the theme is abandonment that you're finding, if it's describing that, or the house, if that's more the descriptor. And since there's no questions, we'll move on. In your handout, I do what's called spiraling up. Those who are students of the Master DK and the Trans-Himalayan Wisdom, but especially the way he writes about esoteric astrology, you'll know that he uses that phrase, spiraling up. Michael Robbins uses that phrase as well. And I do too. So to spiral up is to take the energies that we've just been working with and to refine them purify them, and of course heighten their quality. And so as we do that, then what we end up with is a whole different view on the idea of being alone or being a misfit, not fitting in, and the view from that higher soul, or if you will, triadal. I'm going to hope that most people know that phrase, triadal point of view, is we would see that there's a mirroring going on, a training going on to help us empty our sense of self. And that if that's the path we're on and we're committed to that path, whether we're conscious of that or have made that decision in previous lifetimes and have been in that training for whatever amount of lifetimes. But if what's being done is the training to release the idea of self and put others forefront, then not fitting in is oftentimes because we have a different view of the world. We might have a wide-mindedness. We might not have an interest in argument, because argument is usually just personality driven. There might be the attitude of harmony instead of conflict, as an example. And so those kinds of things are a path, evolution. And so for that reason, the person might be a misfit, putting aside the abandonment theme, now the misfit theme, and not fitting in. So from a path point of view, that is actually mirroring back to us when we say, hey, what about me? That's mirroring back to us, well, aren't you committed to release the self? And then we would ponder that. We go, oh, then this moment is reminding me of that. This is teaching me that. So we're starting to tilt into the idea of Chiron as a mentor and Apollo as his mentor, but it still fits into the misfit kind of way. And equally so, Bodhisattva. Bodhisattva has come to be a kind of a common Buddhist word, if you will, a Mahayana Buddhist word. Bodhisattva is a Sanskrit word. It was being used within the Vedic, dispensation and teachings for a long time before the Buddha was around. So I want to just first off make that point, and it meant the same thing to the Brahmins and the Vedic practitioners, the Upanishad practitioners, as it did, as the Buddha then started to use it. And that is a hero of compassion, a great being, a lighted being. So again, Bodhisattva then has to do with the path. And it's called a hero of compassion because oftentimes to live the path in a fullness is to do heroic things. It is to use heroic effort. It is to achieve things that other people have no interest in achieving. So we might see that the Chiron in its placement points to that. And so we see here a different chart. However, the Chiron is still in Pisces, although it's a different person's chart. And here, this chart is good for reporting to us the idea of the mirror, because as in the mirror to the self, so that this native will always go, oh, right, I remember. It's about selflessness. They're teaching me that I just kind of grasped onto my personality nature and, had my little inner drama about that. And I can let that go because that's actually not what I'm trying to foster. I'm trying to foster less self not more self. And so we see that with Chiron opposing the sun, but equally so, just with Chiron in Pisces in the second house. This Chiron is a resource to the soul. The soul is trying to save others through the qualities that this being brings forward. Saving is, of course, assisting, helping, finding various ways to support. And what we will find oftentimes when the second house is involved is that the person becomes a resource, and the qualities that Chiron is representing by its sign become a resource for others. That's if it's on that turn of the spiral of the path where what the person is, and therefore what Chiron represents, if what the person is actually for the betterment of others, then literally that person becomes a resource, and their skill set becomes a resource for those that this person is trying to help here with it in Pisces. Are there any questions? And certainly anyone can raise your hand and say what you are discovering. That could be a lot of fun for all of us. Then we move on. The positive that comes out of adversity is the second theme in the Chiron myth. There is benefit that comes. We might grow certain qualities, skill set, character, qualities of character. We might be pointed in the direction of virtue. We might have certain things come into our life as a result of any kind of adversity that would not have come into our life had the adversity not been there first. So this is now turning the Chiron into the positive side of it, and we'll see that with Chiron, it being a half and half being, right, half horse, half man, then, it constantly tilts from one side to the other, the yin-yang of Chiron. And these are inseparable. The idea of adversity or challenge and the idea of the benefit gained if we understand that challenge is always for our betterment. It's always to temper us and to make us stronger or clearer or more clarified overall. So if we look to the myth, Apollo, the sun god, found Chiron, took him in, mentored him, and taught him many things. The arts, civility, honed his intuition, and prophecy, taught him prophecy, how to use that intuition in a prophetic way. And of course he was referred to as a son of Apollo, so that goes a long way to the other gods, and that gained a lot of respect. So again, look at your Chiron. We're going to use the same thing over and over again. And this is so that I think that what you'll find is that you will maybe understand more about the sign and the house of your Chiron, like the sign itself, and the range of qualities and experiences that a house can provide by this layering. So we reflect on the benefits that we have gained as a result of what's listed here. You see the Chiron at the bottom of the chart in Gemini, 3rd house. This native was sickly from her teens on, from probably around age 12 through into her early 20s. She just couldn't shake it. So her chi, her prana, Gemini rules the energy. Is it the only sign that points in that direction? No, as we know. But we want to never lose sight of that. We often, in thinking of Gemini, jump to communication or jump to the fidgetiness of the energy. Let's always keep in mind simply the prana, the chi, that Gemini also represents, as well as the nervous system. So she just couldn't keep her prana. She couldn't keep her chi. She had lung things going on all the time, and she just was sickly. What it made her do, because she's a person of resolve and of steadfastness, and she was a trooper. She still is a trooper. So she was not going to be kept down by that. And that inner resolve basically was a self-talk to herself. So again, we see Chiron in Gemini. And she learned how to work with what she had when she had it. Now, as a young adult, she's abroad. She's in college, in a prestigious college in the British Isles. And she's focusing on peace. And the way I read that in her chart was that she had to find peace within herself. She had to listen to the advice of a lot of people, but ultimately she had to make the best out of the situation that she was living for many years. And she did that. She's a strong young woman as a result, and she's going to do good things in the world as a result. She's going to do it with patience as well. So any questions before we move on to the next one? I see a question here. What are the differences in effect of retrograde versus direct motion of the natal current in the chart? I would suggest that it's the same as with any other, any other retrograde. That in general, the retrograde, when it is, that a retrograde planet is internal and moves the energy inside, that we have a hesitancy, oftentimes a compacting of the energy, sometimes an obstruction, a sense of obstruction, not so easy. And it will be a transit to that planet, as we know. A transit loosens it, frees it up. If the planet is direct, then it has fewer obstructions unto itself. We would still look, of course, to the aspects within the chart to see if there's anything that is again, curtailing it, hindering it, or keeping it free as its own theme, the freedom of that energy to flow. But I don't think that we have with Chiron, like the Prometheus and Epimetheus, like with Mercury retrograde or Mercury direct in the chart, and also with Saturn. It's not the same thing as with Saturn as well. You know how we have, the person is slow to come into their own. It might take until their first Saturn return or a transit to the Saturn to unlock it. It's not quite like that. I think the reason for that, and I'm only going on the many, many charts that I've worked with over the years. Somebody else might say something else. But I think the reason why it's not so extreme with Chiron, retrograde or direct, as it is with examples given, Mercury, Saturn, is because of the nature of Chiron. The nature of Chiron is already a yin-yang nature. It is both the luminous and that which kind of gets in the way of that. What gets in the way of that usually is the circumstantial, including people, not internal. However, the nature of the energy of Chiron is to always hold the two as one. And so I think that that's why I have not witnessed a big distinction between our direct or retrograde Chiron. Guidance is built out of this idea of Apollo. We see that because Apollo is the sun god. So light represents the soul, the majesty of the soul. As I teach, the soul is not some glorified personality. When I teach about the soul, we don't lose the soul. You don't have to do soul retrievals. I think that in general that's a frame of reference about the incarnating soul. And I understand the teaching on that and won't go down that road here tonight with you. But here we have Apollo, the sun god, light, guidance that is lighted, guidance that moves us along our lighted path. And so when we look at Chiron again, it's the same thing in our chart, same thing. But now we're going to add the esoterical hierarchical rulers that would be of the sign. I did not send you a chart of all the esoteric and hierarchical rulers. To tell you the truth, I didn't even think of that. So I'm going to hope some of you know them so that you can do this. And of course, it could be a plug for everyone to take the Esoteric Astrology 201 class that begins on Wednesday, but that wasn't the purpose of me not sending you that. I didn't even think of it. We also would see that this level of guidance, the lighted way, and that which keeps us on the lighted way, that it too is echoing something that we're all familiar with in the chart, and that is the gift givers of the chart, Venus and Jupiter. We might also find that this guidance is coming from a Uranian placement or aspect in the chart, that we're used to calling that guidance or intuition or kind of always landing on your feet. Maybe you're used to looking at your Uranus in your chart and saying, oh, that's where that comes from. And so it is. But it also is from the Chiron. So spend a moment with that, with this idea, therefore, this expansion of the sign of your Chiron. That is to say, into the esoteric and hierarchical considerations of it, if you know them. And if you don't know the planets, the rulers, you can still expand into the higher nature of the sign itself. And again, if there's any question. You see on your panel, your control panel, how to put up your hand. Hi, Margaret. So we'll unmute you, Margaret. Hopefully your computer has a mic. It should, as long as it's a... Hi, Margaret. Do you want to speak your question?
Hi, Donna, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, thank you. I've been told that 27 Sag is the center of our galaxy, and my Chiron is on 27 Sag. Can you comment on that?
Sure. Well, one could be flippant and say that you're a galactic being. And maybe that's not so flippant, right? Because it could say that you have wide-mindedness, that you are, have that Sagittarian ethos, a Sagittarian philosophy, an occult orientation, and that your compass, if you will, your internal compass is, towards a very high point. So it might even be that in meditation you're able to align high and sustain that. And in a kind of a profession or a common way of thinking about it, that again you might be a person who coaches or orients people, towards their inner compass, towards that which is true, that which is their own authenticity. Those are some quick things that come to my mind.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
It's in the 8th house.
Say it again, please.
In the 8th house.
Uh-huh.
And I'm curious if it indicates anything about my path, about, what I should be doing, expressing.
I read the 8th house largely as internal transformation, and that which is in the 8th house must be transformed. It is primary, as it is a primary thing that we have set before ourselves in this life. Of course, it will be done with a scalpel-like non-deviation and with insight and precision. And so if you can bring those skills that are to be used on you, if you can use those, for others, in service with others, then that's all I can suggest. But But I have found that the 8th house, unless you're just going to be talking about being a financier, that the 8th house has largely to do with the native's internal transformation process, and that if they are not engaging the planets in the 8th house in that deep, precise, transformative process, they are unhappy people because their life and their karma keeps saying, no, you have to address this, you have to address this.
Thank you so much, Donna. That resonate very, very good.
Good, good, Margaret, I'm glad. You're welcome. Hey, Lib.
Oh, hi, Donna. It's actually Allie. Liv and I are together.
Hey, Allie.
I have a question. My Chiron is in Aries, not quite conjunct Venus. It's 5 degrees apart, but opposing Uranus, which is the Araka ruler of Chiron in the 4th house. So I'm having a little hard time kind of picturing how, if it's opposing it, but it's also, a part of it. I just have a hard time.
Yeah. Which is in the 4th, the Uranus or the Chiron?
Chiron and Venus are both in the 4th.
Okay.
And I will say right now, I know it's, I'm in my Uranus opposition right now.
Yeah. Well, to just stick with the Chiron for a second, you have the Uranus is of the hierarchical ruler, of Aries. So that opposition to Chiron is actually pulling on the highest nature of Chiron. So it's almost like you have in a veiled way, you have two Uranus, right? If we were to use the hierarchical ruler of Chiron, you have Uranus, and then you have Uranus in opposition of it. So it's like the it's like putting two magnets together to make a very powerful field. So that's first off. Where is that powerful field? That powerful field is in the 4th house. And of course, I know that you work with young people, and that what you do with young people is a very pioneering work. Aries is a pioneering work to help them find what is true and real and effective inside them and bring it forward. So you are, in fact, living the higher way of the Chiron, both as the adventurer Aries, as well as the freer, right? Because that's like let my people go kind of side of Uranus and Aries. And you are freeing these people through the guidance that you give them and your profession, so that they can be freed of the stigma, in your case of they need remedial educational work. So you free them of that stigma. So you are the guide, as well as you have received good guidance in order to do that. Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's interesting, because that's perfect. Yeah, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
I think Liv might have a question too, if there's time.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Donna. I just wondered, my Vulcan, or pardon me, my Chiron is in Taurus in the second house, and the hierarchical ruler is Vulcan. And I just wondered if you could speak to that. I don't know a lot about Vulcan.
Sure. Vulcan is, first off, we have that you have two classical gods involved together, and they both were abandoned. As you might recall, for the myth of Vulcan, he too was abandoned by his mother, and then became very much like Chiron. He was also a misfit, Vulcan, and misshapen, and so we have these two kind of misshapen beings, and he, like Chiron, ended up creating beauty and harmony and things of a higher nature were his work. So I think that what you have then, Lib, is the guidance on this turn of the spiral here, the guidance and the support of your path is on a personal level. It is that you have these two conditioners that say you can transform any aspect about you that you want, and you can be successful because these two beings had to take what they had to work with, and they completely refashioned, and that's a Vulcan word, refashioned. They refashioned what they had to work with and turned it into something else. With Chiron, we see that, for instance, with plants. He took a plant, turned it into a medicine, and the result was always a cure for someone. So again, you see that idea of transformation of the matter aspect. Then if we were to look at it professionally, I would prefer the word as a resource. What resources do you bring to your path? What resources, how do you live your path? How do you live your path as a resource for yourself professionally? I think that's a good thing to write down, Liv. How do you live your path as a resource for your profession? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I think so. How do I live my path as a resource for my profession?
Right. In other words, we know each other, Liv. So I know that you're on the path. I know that you're putting a lot of energy into that, a lot of effort into that. And you, because you work with Allie, you're in the profession of helping people who, if they didn't get the help that you all are giving them, if they didn't get that help, they would have very miserable lives. But because they're getting the help, their lives are going to be something. So that's you walking your path and turning what you are doing with yourself, making yourself a more full soul in the world. Now you're using it professionally. And that is to use the Vulcan quality of the refashioning the matter aspect. Do you understand?
Yes, I think so.
Good, good, good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And Jane, I see your question. If Lib and Margaret could please just remember to put those hands down again. That's helpful to my eye. Sagittarius in the 12th house. you're talking about Chiron and Sagittarius in the 12th house. Well, we know that the 12th house, it hides things and obscures, it veils. We get mixed messages about things in the 12th house. Here, this would suggest then that the clarity that Sagittarius can often bring forward, it's kind of like shooting the arrow into the water, right? The water of the 12th house, you have this arrow of Sagittarius. And so it's slowed down. Its clarity might be slowed down. Therefore, we might look at, maybe a fifth ray mind, Jane. We would also look at the Sagittarius usually insists on moving. Chiron too, as a centaur, would be about, well, okay, how do I use my energy? How do I use this Sagittarius energy? And the 12th house would kind of dampen or put some parameters on that, such that the Chiron energy would have to be used internally. Now we have the idea of the mystical vision. We have the idea of the wide scope, the empathy, the universality of the 12th house with the large heart, large-mindedness of Sagittarius. And so we would see that. Now, since I know you, Jane, I know that exactly that's what you bring to your community. It's what you bring to your art. It's why you're involved with your husband in the profession that you are, a particular kind of artwork related to, the Catholic icons. So to me, it fits. So then, let's move on. Because it's been almost an hour and we're not done. But this is good. You're welcome, Jay. Very briefly, let me go back to that. Very briefly on this one. But importantly, I think this is a very worthwhile pondering. The house of Chiron, this is my suggestion. That's all I can say. And maybe it's wrong, but I've kind of come to this in looking at the charts that I have over the years. That the house of Chiron represents the soul of higher nature. Why? Because Chiron, for all his, he's a centaur, he's a horse. But he's sublime, highly intuitive, masterful of everything that he touches, skilled in many, many ways. So there's something about the wisdom and the compassion that Chiron lived in the myth without fail and flawlessly. So therefore, to me, the house that Chiron is in represents the soul or higher nature. And the opposite house to Chiron indicates our personality tendencies, which we all have, to avoid or negate or combat our higher calling and the gifts of the higher way. So I would, again, leave that with you, because that would be an excellent contemplation, especially the next time that any of us in the moment is in that avoidance, is in that negation, is in that inner argument with ourselves over exactly what we know is the right thing to do in the higher way. But for whatever reason, we're saying, no, I don't want to do that today. then that would be perfect to actually ponder, well, wow, okay, what's that house all about and why am I doing that? Now we move into the classical phrase given for Chiron, and that is the wounded healer. And so what does that mean? It means the empathy, to have developed empathy, to have walked in another person's shoes and in their footsteps, and to have experienced a human being as a human being without judgment, to have the skill to meet another for who they are, and then to apply wisdom and compassion in our life. We remember in the myth, as given to you in your pages, that Chiron trained or mentored, not really trained in the combat skills, but mentored some of the great Greek warriors and heroes, and among them was Hercules. And Hercules, in one of the 12 labors of Hercules, he was in a row with the centaurs and shot an arrow off, in anger, losing his temper once again, Hercules, and hit the wrong centaur. Or maybe the right centaur as far as karma went, who knows. Long story short though, Chiron, this master healer, who established the beginnings of Western medicine as far as Greek mythology is concerned, could not heal himself. And so here's the idea. The idea is that we all have experienced a theme of wounding in our life. That's the human journey. And it might be along the theme of abandonment, or along the line of misfit, or not being loved, or in the way that we need, or whatever it might be is our theme. Not being appreciated, whatever it might be. And we have discovered, though, as mindful, heartful human beings, we have discovered that when we address this with compassion and wisdom within ourselves, we grow as a result of that adversity. That experience for ourselves then gives us the empathy to interact with other people. And I'll give you an example for myself. For whatever amount of empathy that I thought I had as a human being, as I've journeyed through my 14 years of having MS, a handicapped body, I can tell you I have far more empathy and compassion for situations that my eye and my mind never even noticed before. But because now I live what I do physically, my eye and my mind are very aware of how many things are not conducive to a person who is handicapped, which would even include a mother holding a baby on her hip and she only has one hand to open a very heavy door with, or something like that. So that's an example simply of adversity leading to empathy and learning to use that skill. So that's the idea of the wounded healer. So you would look now at your chart with that in mind. And what we see with this chart, just to use it, let me see here. Yeah. So this person, we see their Chiron at the bottom of the chart. in Leo conjunct Pluto. Excuse me. The adversity is classical in that we see, as we would with, because we know astrology, so we see Pluto in Leo, and Pluto, Pluto usually represents a masculine character in the life. In Leo, this is a strong-minded masculine character who is more concerned for himself, possibly, than he is for other people. And so, in fact, that was the case. This was a harsh father. That adversity had its ups and downs for this person, but this person grew into a highly authentic, capable woman who became a leader in her profession, and her profession was to stand by others when they would need someone there for long periods, and they would not really know that she was there in the full capacity that she was. And I have to kind of veil all these things because many of us know one another, and I don't want to, divulge any confidences or anything like that. But I think you get the picture. That through that strength of character that she had to develop, she could then give that strength of character steadfastly to people when they needed it, and as they needed it for long periods. So look at your chart with that in mind. And any questions? Of course, that idea of taking adversity and having it transform is part of the path, and it's called by many names in various traditions, but it's just a path. So here we have the transformation that is the path. Chiron being the great healer, what is healing? Healing is transformation. So when we look at Chiron, the question for us to ask ourselves thematically in our chart is what is trying to be transformed in order for a core. Now we are talking about a deep-seated core. In the terms of the Master DK, it would be a deep-seated glamour or fundamental illusion that we hold. And that if we really get at that and can transform it, then we would be releasing ourselves as Chiron released himself from his immortality, such that he could then die because he had this incurable wound. So he was living great suffering. That could all be talked about from a Buddhist point of view, to be sure. But we can leave it as just a path, and that because every human being has this core fundamental illusion that our personality is predicated upon, of course, we we do suffer, and we create suffering for others as well. And so the Chiron ultimately is pointing us in the direction of what it is that is our deep illusion and how to transform it. The how is, of course, to release that illusion into the very quality of the sign that Chiron is in. And to realize that the house that Chiron is in, all the ways that those environments, situations, circumstances that are represented by the house, that they are all the medicine. They are all in any moment. That is the very cure we need. So, those who are in the practice living awareness, I say it all the time and you hear it. Every moment is the moment of awakeness. And so that's ultimately what Chiron is reporting to us. And the sign of Chiron is the cure, if you will, for that fundamental illusion that each and every one of us has, and we'll all have it, in whatever way that we do. So any questions? And you can see in this chart, while I'm waiting to see if there is any question, you can see in this chart that, the natives' issue is front and center. I mean, it's glaringly obvious in the ninth house, opposite, not by degree, but by sign, opposite the Chiron. So here again, if we go back to the idea of the mirror, when the person is focused upon emptying the self, that whole kind of idea that was earlier, then here's the mirror. This is all pretty obvious. This person doesn't have to go too far to figure it out. Well, if there's no questions, I don't want to rush you. But I do want you to know that this course is an online course. It starts Wednesday, 6 weeks, and it is open enrollment. Chiron in the 11th. What sign, Kathy? In Pisces? Well, I think we've had a couple of people with Chiron and Pisces earlier in the evening. So you would take the things that were offered there, and then add to that, add to that on the cusp. Which cusp? 10th or 12th? No, it can't be on two cusps, hon. So I'll just go with Pisces and Chiron and Pisces. It's on the cusp of the 11th and the 12th. I see what you're writing. Okay. Chiron and Pisces. Well, the fundamental illusion could be simply about saving. Now, first off, that's a illusion of the path. because the path is about others. The path is about service. The path is about losing oneself, right? According to the mantra from Master DK. I lose myself and find myself and enter into peace. We lose ourselves in the care and giving of empathy and compassion to and for others and their well-being. The peace that we find and discover, of course, is the peace of a wide open heart and an eased mind, because we've made more harmony in the world. So, although care for others is the theme of the path, it also can be a very big glamour and a big illusion. And Pisces epitomizes that for us in its energy. We get dreamy about it. We want everybody to like us, for instance. We might avoid conflict because of wanting to be kind and be nice, etc. So you could think on those, see if any of those things apply. There might be an innate fearfulness. That's Pisces, its watery nature, and Cancer would share in that as well. So we would drop in and go, well, what am I afraid of? Am I afraid? Is there a timidity, a fearfulness? Those kinds of things. And the last thing I would offer is, from the point of view of transformation, fundamental core transformation. Is that, Pisces can just be soft and not have a sense of its own backbone. Now, there's variations on that theme, right? There's gradations, I should say, gradations of that. So one can, again, check in with oneself and see about that. Now, I know that you're a double Aquarius, so that's strong energy, and you might find that you're so identified with the Aquarius that then it would be that the Chiron, if the Chiron is in the 11th house, it's actually it being an Aquarius house, right? So if the Chiron is in the Aquarius house, then it's pointing to Aquarius, your double Aquarius, as where you would look for the quality to be transformed. I hope that was clearly said. I see the time. I hope this has been informative and I hope catalyzing for many people to have a new view with your chart, play with your chart kind of in a new way, maybe explore it a little bit. Certainly you can feel free to email me if you have any thoughts or questions. But I hope that you might be sparked to do the upcoming esoteric astrology course. It's 6 Wednesdays. We will use your charts. Everyone will have copies of everyone's charts, so it won't be a blind thing like it is here. And we will be delving into how to use these higher turns of the spiral of esoteric and hierarchical rulers in chart interpretation. It's exciting to do, and I don't know how many opportunities people have to learn about that. I don't know how many people are teaching that. So, if you're interested, it's on the website spiritfire.com. Go to education and sign up for the course. Love to have you. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It was a joy. Love you all. Create your day.